Hey folks, one day some industrious soul is going to overlap my intros, and this episode exists just to throw that off. That aside, I've received a review key for an altogether viciously challenging title, namely Flying Out Games' rapid-fire action roguelite, ScourgeBringer. Bear with me as I boil down my thoughts on its fast-paced combo, and if I thought it brought the thunder, or if it wound up being the bane of my existence. I'm your host Arlyeon, and let's find out together. How the monolith first arrived is no longer remembered. That knowledge purged through both the passage of time and the unrelenting destruction cast in its wake. No, humanity was only left with one fact to grapple with. So long as it hunted them, they'd never know peace. For even as society was shattered and mankind reduced to nomadic tribes, it continued to hunt them tirelessly. Hence, it came to be known as the ScourgeBringer. Kyra's task is hardly enviable, trained since youth in order to do the impossible, to brave the interior of a structure no one has ever returned from in order to halt its endless rampage. And perhaps she may even discover the truth of its nature. Theatrical intro aside, ScourgeBringers is a fairly story-light experience at its core. What the NPCs have to say is sparse, though Garo, your hub-oriented NPC, does provide ongoing commentary whenever you return after doing something new. He also helps you to understand how to use a PC in the post-apocalypse, which is nice, given that the gist of the game's backstory is told through small lore snippets you'll find on collectible floppy disks. There also has to be a safer way to store those details. I mean, there's also the Stellies, a set of mini monoliths that provide details about each of the game's regions, but you'll need to beat the game in order to acquire the upgrade that'll let you decipher those, so yeah, that takes a bit. The endings are also a bit on the brisk side. While I don't mind them per se, the basic ending felt like a bit of a kick to the shin after all my struggles to get there. Thankfully, clearing the game did give me access to the more challenging Roots of Chaos, which not only cranked up the game, it also afforded me the option of choosing between the game's two true endings. While short, they do at least provide a resolution to your journey there, though if you're wanting the full story, you're definitely going to need to go lore hunting. You'll have plenty of opportunities though, given ScourgeBringer is the sort of game that will see you dying again, and again, and again. It's hard, yet it's also quite easy to get into. Essentially, your goal as Kyra is to navigate the ScourgeBringer, just making your way through the randomized chambers of each of its stages in order to confront the judge of each floor. Okay, it's maybe not quite that simple, given that upon entering just about any room, you'll find yourself locked in and swarmed by enemies looking to body you. And your arsenal starts out quite limited, with a fast attack, a heavy attack, and a dash, which lacks iframes, and a ranged attack. Oh, and a low amount of health and an almost negligible amount of iframes after your hit, meaning each and every room feels challenging. Any slip-up you make can have grievous consequences, and it requires that you enact your evasions with a harrowing degree of precision, lest you find yourself wombo-comboed by a slew of enemies who mistook you for a free buffet. And no, cheesing enemies with the gun isn't really an option, since by default, its ammo is not only limited, but it also requires you to beat up enemies to slowly recharge them. Something which made the heavy attack's ability to stagger an enemy while it's preparing a move feel invaluable, since not only did it make them more vulnerable to damage while stunned, it gave me breathing room to dish out damage and build meter. Essentially, it's a long road to mastery, and it's made even more arduous by the simple fact that each level has its own identity, through the combination of the enemies that populate it, its traps, and even the gimmicks they introduce, such as the Pac-Man-esque movement mechanics introduced in what would normally be the final stage. Oh, and this extends to the judges as well. Each Titanic boss serves as a fairly solid capstone to the stages they find themselves in. A grueling wake-up exam that reminds you that while the basic enemies can chew you up, they're just cannon fodder. I honestly really like these encounters, as they had some pretty varied movesets, which also get more vicious and change up once you've lowered their health. Though, I'll admit, it actually sometimes took me a bit to actually get around to encountering the later judges, given that you only gain entrance to a boss's chambers once you've cleared out all the guardians on a given stage. And whilst you can always count on your judge encounters to be the same, the Guardian mini-bosses are actually plucked from a pool that's relevant to level. Suffice to say, more than a few runs effectively crashed and burned because I ran smack dab into a brand new Guardian whose moveset was still unknown to me. That, or just sheer attrition, because I needed to overcome 3 of those jerks before a boss wore me down. That said, you're not completely left to your own devices. Sometimes when you clear a room, it'll cough up helpful items like heals, a weapon, the ability to reload your charges, or a run-specific boost to your capabilities. More health, more damage, faster recharges? Don't mind if I do. There's shops, too, which will helpfully part with their wares in exchange for the blood of your enemies, or your own lifeblood, which can be more or less harrowing depending on how well you're doing. Frankly, I'd taken the risk more than a few times just to get my hands on a different kind of gun, since there's a pretty solid variety and some pretty rad gun mods you can slap onto them for increased havoc. And some of these are a bit interesting because they're mixed blessings, like a small chance to do extra damage, but normally having 50% damage on your guns. That said, when you're using a laser that refracts on hit and you also modded it to bounce off walls for even more hits, yeah, I'll take that gamble. The secret room, if you can find them, are also pretty helpful, given they tend to hold high-powered guns or stat boosters, though that also requires you to have ammo to shoot out suspicious walls and, well, figuring out which walls are suspicious enough to warrant shooting in the first place, something perhaps best left done till the end of this stage. Oh, and there's also the challenge chambers, which allow you to opt into getting swarmed by wave after wave of enemies in order to feasibly earn a heap of blood needed to purchase items, as well as a small explosion of items. That said, it was perhaps the altars which made the biggest difference in each run. Each floor contains one, and they provide a random assortment of buffs you can accumulate in order to make your descent? Journey? Look, it makes the run easier. Or, well, it can, given that some of them have rather specific requirements. Things like a heightened chance to gain items when finishing a room is always useful, as is better drops from judges, including a guaranteed healing item. That's just rad. That said, an extra 40% damage if you're either at full health or 1 health remaining is... They're powerful options, I can say that much, but they're definitely a lot more specific than their peers. Though I guess you could try to stack up a bit of shields, health that isn't health and caps at 3, in order to enjoy the benefits longer. I guess. And that's without even getting into the tangent, by the way, of cursed blessings, which do stuff like tank your max health in order to boost your sword damage. Though, it'll also be a while until you see those cursed ones, given they're tied to meta progression, because yes, that's a whole thing in ScourgeBringer since Roguelite. See, as you mow down judges and their array of guardians, you'll find yourself collecting precious droplets of judge's blood, a more rare variant of the blood you're already beating out of the bodies of your enemies. While completely useless during a run, you are able to spend these at the chiming tree, an object located in the hub, which also happens to double as a literal skill tree with skill branches. Yeah, I'm really going to need to root around here if I want to crack any puns the game hasn't already made. Feel free to bark at me a bit about my choice of language in the comments, but anyways, there's some incredibly useful additions in here, like the ability to fast travel around the map to save time, the addition of a combo system that allows you to make more blood from enemies in exchange for progressing through without being hit. There's straightforward upgrades, like extra health, as well as being able to bounce bullets back with your heavy attack. This one especially feels like a bit of a necessity, given the sheer amount of projectiles that can wind up on screen. Though, all of these things helped a great deal insofar as allowing me to progress further into the monolith. They also unlocked brand new altar blessings, since there's a fair number associated to certain skill upgrades. That said, it actually didn't take too long for Judge Blood to lose any value for me by virtue of acquiring everything. Suffice to say, while your early forays into the skill tree will be hindered by Judge Blood, you'll begin to acquire gallons of it as you consistently plunge deeper. And then you have to stop having a use for it, and it just sits in your inventory taunting you. I'm onto having so much that when I finally beat the game the first time around, I was able to instantly purchase everything from the final skill branch that unlocks and have spare change left over. Just a sad bathtub's worth of judge blood. Though, I guess I didn't think about it too long, since my concerns soon found themselves dominated by, dun dun dun, the roots of chaos that I mentioned in the story section. Essentially, gaining access to them is a post-game skill tree unlock, which makes sense given that it allows you a more difficult version of the main game. Like, there's actually a feature in the game that gradually adjusts difficulty to make advancing through it more accessible. And this feature goes right out the window in the Roots of Chaos and is then further complemented by a wide array of difficulty features you can opt into. So you can do the gamer equivalent of snorting wasabi up your nose. That said, if you do want to see the game's true endings, you do need to venture into them and toggle the option to go deeper and unlock the very final stage. That's not to say ScourgeBringer is completely without mercy, by the way. Even without the difficulty being automatically adjusted, there are a few accessibility features that work when it comes to all of its game modes. Things like being able to hold down the attack key to mash out attacks faster, the ability to adjust the overall game speed to be slower or faster, or even adjusting the speed of projectiles that are coming towards you. Also, you can opt into more healing. It's pretty awesome, really. That said, even without those features, I've got a feeling ScourgeBringer would keep people hooked, if only by virtue of its absolutely smashing soundtrack. Like, it goes hard to the point that when combat broke out, I found myself wondering if I'd wandered into the mist of a Doom title. And when it didn't sound like the second coming of the Doomslayer, it was still a treat with a solid gamut of tracks to accompany exploration, combat, and boss battles, all of which felt distinct from area to area. ScourgeBringer just slams on this front, to the point that it is one of the better soundtracks I have heard recently. And the visuals are excellent too. I was really happy to see the enemy variety, and the fact that even monsters that are essentially elite versions of existing monsters still looked distinct from their peers. And the judges' environments felt satisfying to explore, with the animations also helping provide clues as to when I should expect complete shenanigans. Though, I'm not gonna lie, the 5th stage is completely disorienting to me visually just because of the overall speed of the game and the weird sort of leaving the right side of the screen and coming in the left side of the screen at high speed. It just kills my brain. So hard. So hard. But yeah, that's the crux of what I have to say, so it's about time to wrap everything up short and sweet for the finale, and ultimately, I did have a lot of fun with ScourgeBringer, especially once I moved away from keyboard and mouse and started using controller. Like, yes, I could configure them, but it didn't feel right. But yeah, the core mechanics are a lot of fun, provided a solid challenge to players, which made the process of learning the ins and outs of how to confront each normal enemy and their tougher peers a rewarding process. I actually felt like I was mastering things. It also made the way judges changed up their patterns in a fight absolutely terrifying the first time you make it that far. And honestly, this just pairs so well with the sheer simplicity of the game. It just felt really good to pick up and play, even after I'd paused for a day or two. Its runs were fairly quick to get through, and it's really forgiving as far as just being able to save and quit. Still, my biggest gripe likely falls within that same simplicity. It really isn't all that long until you have the full scope of all your kit available to you, at which point you start to notice that the randomness between your runs is fairly limited. A limited range of blessings, of weapons, and upgrades. ScourgeBringer feels less about the chaotic RNG that normally defines rogues, and more like it is embracing the intrinsic challenge of its gameplay loop. And also this extends to its narrative, since I felt that it fell by the wayside in favor of the gameplay. Still, I can't begrudge it for this decision. Again, I iterate. I had a lot of fun here, enough so that I'd very much recommend it as a hack and slash experience, though it did feel a bit more shallow as far as rogues go. That said, if you're wanting to find a game that'll kick your teeth in, this one will likely hit home. And in case the terrible pun is lost on you, that's a hit rating. I just recommend this game in general. It's solid. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you have an interest in supporting my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know there's a new release. There's a Discord, links in the description, you can become part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron, and we now have a Patreon, which also links in the description. That said, I'll catch you folks on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.